Just now, second. And that's long.
Okay, it's 7 o'clock. That clock is a little bit fast. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. I guess I'll stand here where you out there in virtual world can see me. I'm Debbie Dillion. I'm a horticulture agent here in Union County. I work with these wonderful master gardeners that are here tonight. I work with homeowners like you folks that have come in tonight, and also work with a regional group, professional group of landscapers. The Successful Gardener Program is a free educational program that we do every month for the public. So we're glad that y'all came out tonight. You're in for a treat. And I assume you're here because you want to learn more about hostas and how to grow them better. And that's what Nils is going to talk to you about tonight. So he has North State Hosta, which my understanding is you started that as a hobby in your backyard. Is that correct?
Keep it a hobby, but
Still, but people like us want to buy them, right? So the master gardeners, if you've been to our plant sales in the past, have partnered with him, to sell some of his product. And he brought a few for show and tell tonight. And you go to the Matthews Market every week or once a month?
And the market, the whole business is changing, so, you can reach me at nchostaguy@gmail.com.
Okay, so you can reach him?
We're gonna be doing more with the master gardeners here and the Charlotte group, so.
Okay.
The whole model's changing.
Okay, so his model is changing. So I think he's gonna be working more through sales with our Extension Master Gardener group here in Union County during their plant sales, and also with the Charlotte Mecklenburg group. If any of you might be from that area, I'm excited that they have a new horticulture extension agent in Mecklenburg. His name is Sam Humphrey. He's young and full of great ideas, and he has a lot of on-the-ground experience with different things related to horticulture. So I hope you get a chance to meet him because he'll be a really good contact for you. So before I turn it over to Nils, I'm going to talk to you about our next Successful Gardener meeting, which is July the 6th at 7 o'clock. And we're going to be in for another treat because we have a young lady named Presley Williams from Renfro's Hardware, Renfro's Farm. She's going to be talking to us about cut flowers. And because y'all are here tonight, you have the inside track to join the Master Gardeners for a tour of the Renfro Farm on July the 20th. So make sure you check in on that sheet back there. And make sure I have your email because I'll send out an email with the information. Because it's a tour I've set up for the Master Gardeners. But because if you come to the July meeting and hear a talk, you can come on that tour with us. It's right in Matthews. It's probably going to be right during rush hour, so it may take, you'll have to allow time for that. But I wanted to go ahead and make y'all aware of that tonight. And so I'm going to turn it over to Nils. He's going to come take my place in front of the computer. And I'm going to make sure that if we get questions asked, we repeat them. So he repeats them so that the people online can hear them. Same thing. I guess, Christina, you're monitoring the chat box for questions online. So when you get questions in here, Nils, if you'll repeat them, please.
Not a problem. Thank you for inviting me. And let me see if I've got the right place here. They told me I was going to see myself. And it's great. That'll totally distract me.
Can they hear, Christina?
You good? All right. Can't hear me, just raise your hand, but I can yell louder. So I started the hostas as a hobby. And it just kind of grew. And one day I was at a farmer's market, actually, and I said, I don't like your hostas. They're not very good. And so she says, well, what's wrong with them? I said, hey, you're just not getting good hostas. She said, well, do you have any that's better? That started it from there. So it was just from there. So I've been probably 15, 16 years now growing it. I stay very localized in terms of the Piedmont area. I have about 75 varieties, about 4,000 hostas. So, and I grow them in my backyard. So people say, how do you do that? And I say, well, very well, I think. But if you grow them in pots, you can do a lot of things with them because they are very good pots. And I'll repeat some of the questions that people ask me all the time. One of them is, do they grow well in containers? They're sitting there going, I hope so. I mean, it's just one of those questions that gets asked, and I think when they think about it, they go, oh, I didn't think I'd do that. So I typically go with garden clubs, with master gardeners, a couple of retail places that, on there, but my area that I focus on is the unusual and the miniatures, which are very hard to find. And also a lot of the classic ones, that, I don't do a lot of them because you can go to the big box stores and get the same thing over and over and over. Because that's the way they contract out. And people are always surprised. Hostas, when I tell them that there's about 10,000 registered hostas. And so it's a process because somebody else they developed through hybridizing or finding it in the ground, and it's different than what the mother looks like. And then they call that sport. And then they call that sport fishing if you're looking for that, but people do that. So they think they have something new. You have to show stability at least 3 to 5 years. They'll send it in, register it. They'll do a DNA background check on it. And it's pretty involved to get one registered because it's too easy to get to duplicate something. Even though they may look alike, a lot of times they're not. So when they're registered, that's unique in itself. Now, out of that, there's only about 3,500 commercially available. Because what will happen is people will get them, think they got something registered, go out there and they find out after about 4 or 5 years, they're not real viable. They start going back to mama or let's go on to something else, but they're not real stable. So I try to make sure that I get some good sources and we go from there. So can you give me a little background, the history of them? Because people think they're native, they're not. Even in the mountains where the ventricosa, which is one of the varieties, grows just wild up there. You'll see them, the big green ones, and they'll have big purple flowers. Well, those are unique because that particular one self-seeds. They all can seed, but they're all not hugely fertile. But that one is. The downside of that one is that it doesn't like to get along with other hostas. Hostas are very promiscuous. It's probably the best way to put it. You put 2 hostas in a room and you'll have a whole bunch of variety coming out of them. So when a hybridizer decides, I like this one for this characteristic, I like this one for this characteristic, and if I put them together, I should be able to get a combination that will have those characteristics that I'm looking for. Whether it's a white edge, white center, a gold center. I mean, I've got some examples to talk about that. And they try to develop that. And what they'll typically do, they'll collect those seeds, plant them in a tray, about 2,000 and typically in a tray. And if they're lucky, they'll find what they think is 10 viable ones out of the whole thing. So it's a brutal job. I mean, you get the whole tray full of them and they'll just pull them out. So not what I want, not what I want, not what I want. And they all may be good hostas, but it's not and that's the way they work. They have to be very focused on this is what I want to bring to the marketplace. So the market's always changing, always developing new things, and they'll do it on themselves too. And I'll talk about that one too. But they're not native, and they do cross-pollinate very easily, but some are more fertile than other ones. So, but they came to the United States with Thomas Jefferson. He was, when he was the ambassador to France, he visited Sweden and found them and said, oh, these are great, where do they come from? And they said, Japan. He said, what? Yeah, so if you look at the map, the hostas grow China, South Korea, North Korea, Japan. And that's it. Just that you draw a circle around that. And there's plentiful, but they're all different. Like even in Japan, the 2 big islands, they're different. So they're kind of interesting. And some like more water, some like higher elevations and all that, but that's the area they grow from. So he brought 7 of those varieties, which is about all they had at that time, back to the United States, planted them in Monticello, and they're still there. It's not the original plants, obviously, because that one, they built 200 years, that's something. So they replaced them with the same variety, the same type. So I call it a heritage plant because it's been part of the culture. They're not native, but the big appeal to them is they're not invasive. You know, people say the ones the mountains are, yeah, they self-seed, but they don't just take over. You know, they'll just over 50 years, you may have a big clump like, you know, like that. They're just not do that fast. So that's a big appeal, because you don't want something, especially from China, if we've got wisteria or bamboo or any of the other things that are highly invasive, then you understand that's a, you know, huge problem, but they just take over. So he brought them here, and for a lot of years, there was hybridizing going on. People found out they would cross-pollinate, they would develop some, and about the early 1930s or 40s, there was probably less than 200 varieties available, just from cross-pollinating from hybridizers. Because the problem is, what you got to do is you get the plant, you develop it, you grow it up and to a certain size, at least 3 years minimum, but they shoot for 5 for stability. And then you say, okay, I've got a stable plant, I've got a new plant. Well, then they got to go grow them and divide them, because that's what they did, is that they would divide them and then you just keep going from there. So you're another 5, 7, 8 years out before you can actually go to market with something on that. So that started changing late 60s, early 70s with tissue culture. Tissue culture basically takes a plant, what they will find a true specimen, the standard, and they will cut segments of it, not a lot, just a little piece of it, put growth hormone in a test tube, drop it in there, and over just weeks, they'll start growing into a plant inside that test tube. So the huge benefit is we cut out about 3 years of development. We get a plant that's very consistent in traits, and we get to screen for disease, because to get the diseases on there, viruses especially are usually lethal to a hosta. There's no cure for them. So if you ever have a hosta that's mottled looking, spotted, you know, kind of just getting bumpy and not looking like that, it's not a new variety, it's a virus. You're gonna need to dig it up, throw it out, and don't plant another hosta in there, because you can't get rid of them. But we can screen now in the test tubes that their virus, hosta virus X is the main culprit. There's some specialty ones tied to certain hostas, but that's the big one. And they'll screen them, and then you know they're free. So everything I provide I know it's been screened for viruses. When I started, 10 years ago, it wasn't uncommon to go into these big boxes and you'd see hostas that were, kind of interesting, but I knew they had viruses. You know, because back then, most of the hosta tissue culture came from Holland. Holland shipped thousands and thousands of them over here. And they said, well, you know, we don't screen for viruses because it's not a problem. It's not for them at that time, but 5 or 7 years later, it'll show up in your garden and you'll go, what happened here? It doesn't just show up, it's been in there, and it's been dormant, and it just kicks in. So they now screen for it, but, you know, we're not sure China does. Brazil's starting to, you know, there's different pockets that are growing into that. So you've got a huge amount of variety out there. And I'm not asking you to sign up for 3,500 different brands of hostas, but there's enough out there for you to find something you like. So my first question is, how many of you grow hostas? Let me go backwards. How many don't grow hostas? Okay, there's always a couple. You know, you're about to be converted. So, just so you know, I did a talk to the Daylily Society, and I said, yeah, I warned you. I said, you guys may give up your daylilies by the time I get through with you. You know, daylilies are full sun, hostas for shade. So you're going to bring color, you're going to bring action to them in a lot of different ways, and they can just make a dark corner or an area that just doesn't seem like it's doing anything, just come to life. They go through a normal cycle. They come up, they go dormant. You'll see them in the spring, and the eyes will come up, just like potato eyes, really is what they call them, the eyes. And I have people send me texts all the time in the spring. Oh, that hosta I got from you is now I got 7 eyes, you know, so they're counting the eyes. Can I divide it now? And we go through the division discussion, which I'll come back to. And so they come up, they go through the growth cycle, they will continue growing until the temperature here hits about 90. When it hits 90, because they have large leaf areas, and the water that comes up through there rehydrates those leaves because all the evaporation is from those leaves. At 90, they know that their water pump can't rehydrate those leaves fast enough. So, which is why they get bigger in the north, because 90 comes later. Here it comes a little bit earlier. But and most of them, not all of them, most of them will continue growing during the summer. Blues typically not. The blues come up and they're done usually with the growth, because that's it for them. And so then they'll flower sometime between late May and into, I've seen it in October, depending on the variety, and go anywhere from a white flower to a dark purple flower with a ton of variations: pink, lavender, striped, deep trumpets, short trumpets, kind of a fan shaped on them. So they all kind of do different things. There's actually one it's a reverse. It's the center of the hosta flower is out, and then on the rest of it's kind of below. So it's kind of weird looking, but it's pretty in itself. So you got the flowering cycle. The flowering will attract bees. They love them a lot. The trumpet-shaped ones will attract hummingbirds, especially the scented variety, which falls under Plantagenet, depending on which side of the Mississippi you are on. But that's, if you know stained glass, guacamole, those are the two main ones. Cathedral windows, all of those in that variety have white, deep trumpets, and they typically bloom here in late July or August, early August. Now, the interesting part of that thing is they can grow anywhere, but up north, Minnesota, northern Michigan, they're lucky if they get a flower, because it's pushed so far out to them. That cycle is, and I went to a talk one time with somebody in Minnesota talking about growing hostas in Minnesota and what their challenges were. And they love guacamole, but they don't get flowers most of the time. So she said every time somebody got a flower in our club, they call everybody. We went and had a party and go to see the flower, because they'd see it, because it's pretty impressive, and it will definitely attract the hummingbirds. And so you should let that go. A lot of people will cut them off after that. I used to do that, but it doesn't change the cycle, because they're still going to, once they get through flowering, they're going to start developing their eyes for next year. So if you've been treating this thing with a lot of love and TLC, you can dig one up, some midsummer, and you'll see the eyes for next year. So it's saying, you give me plenty of water, you give me plenty of nourishment, so next year I'm going to get bigger. And if it's a tough year, hot, not a lot of water and all of this stuff, they may just hold the line. They may just say, I'm not going to add any more on here and support them. If they had a really good year, some of them just double, and so, but those eyes will just sit there till next spring. So when to divide them? You divide them most any time, but the spring's the easiest time, because when you see those eyes come up, you can tell where you can cut into them. And division for me, I like to keep the mature leaves, because it's 3 to 5 years to really get the mature leaf on it. They'll be green, they'll be pretty, but they're different animals when they get mature, and much more bolder and dramatic. So I always say, when you get a plant that's got mature leaves, try not to take more than a third. You can do a half, but don't no more than that, because what you're going to do is you're going to not, probably in all likelihood, not give it enough roots to support whatever you've got up top. And remember, that water pump is not real efficient, so it's going to not have enough on it. It'll survive in all likelihood, but what it's going to do is it's going to go back to where it was 2 years ago. It's going to get smaller until it says, okay, I got water source, I got roots, I got everything else on it. So if you want to be aggressive and divide, you can do that. Just know that you're going to probably give 2 to 3 years up to get them back to the mature. But it's a fast way to get a liner, an edging, and everything like that. So, different opinions on division, but I every time I'm with customers like yourself, I always get, they look at it, I can get 7 out of this one. Okay, well, you can, but you probably won't get this size for another 3 to 4 years. Just know that it's gonna protect itself, just like it stops growing at 90 degrees, because it just will hold the line. Now, the plantagenet I talked about before, it will continue to grow and flush out. And so people that have deer problems, they love those because they'll just delete them down and they'll just come back up again. So they keep growing, but the blues don't. But the deer usually don't like the blues, so that's some upside on that. Blues tend to come up later. Does everybody know why they're called blues? This is a good one. You need to know. Okay. All hostas are green. The blue comes from the wax it produces. The wax is a reflection off the sky. So the more wax, the bluer it is. And so what we look for in a blue hosta is how long will it hold that wax and how long will it stay blue? Because as soon as it gets to 90 degrees again, all the rules change again. All that wax is going to melt away. Okay, and you got a nice, beautiful green hosta, but people don't always pick up on that. But so that's one of the hybridizers look for is how long will you hold the wax? And you'll see the wax now on more varieties than just the blues or greens, but I'll call them blues because that's what they shoot for. But you can see that there's a one called ambrosia, which is a cousin of guacamole. It's a different yellow on it. They're very similar than that, but it's got a really smoky cover on it, real waxy. So it's kind of cool. And then as the summer comes, the heat comes, it just explodes with this shiny color. It totally transforms. It's smoky and then it goes to the color thing. And like stained glass does really well with the heat. And it gets really shiny in about August and bright green in the middle there. You'll see it over time. So people really like the transition of not just, as we in the hosta world say, oh, it's just another nice green hosta, because there's a bunch of green ones out there, but they all have different characteristics. So if you got a white edge, it's going to typically be called frost or ice. So like first frost, if you're familiar with that one, it's got a white edge on it. Why they call it first frost? Because it holds its color and shape until the first frost. All right, and so its sister is June. If you're familiar with June, it's called June because it's at its best in June. The bright yellow and all that stuff. And then as it goes along, you'll see it get darker in the middle and all that because it starts putting more chlorophyll out. Chlorophyll is a natural sunblock for hostas. The white edge ones do very well here. White centered ones, most of them don't. There's some that do, but the reason they don't is it's called meltout. The white stays on there. There's no chlorophyll on it. When it gets hot, the whole middle will just melt out because it's got no protection. So there's now varieties where it'll hold its white, and when it starts getting sunny, it'll just flip over and be all green, or it'll start producing chlorophyll. So there's all kind of tricks that they'll do on that. But white centered ones are very popular. Be aware that you may get a burnout in the middle there, or white, just disappears. I'll get a call and I say, well, my hosta was looking good, and then the middle's all gone. Who ate that? The sun. Get burned out of there. So the other trend is going to miniatures now. Miniatures are huge growth. They've been around, but not a lot of different varieties. And the one that really broke it open was blue mouse ears. Is anybody familiar with blue mouse ears? No? Okay. Well, blue mouse ears, it looks like an African violet outdoors. That's blue mouse ears. Because this comes up with a flower just like an African violet. This was found next to a tree that it had mutated from what it really was. So that's what I'm going to bring over here. I'll see if I can do this with a TV screen on here. Let's see. Put them on here and then I'll hold it back so they can see. So there's 4 plants on here. One of these is the mother. The other 3 are from that mother. Through some, put it in. You guys can see it on the screen. They've all changed over time. The original one is Blue Cadet. Blue Cadet is one of the old classic ones. Small one, not a miniature, but small. And it's a great edger, because if you get a chartreuse one behind it, it really makes that chartreuse stand out on there. And the miniatures are small, put out a ton of flowers. So all these will have, having that characteristic, will have this type of flower. And you'll know when they'll bloom, they'll all bloom at the same time and work from there. Well, this guy was planted next to a tree. The tree over time had grown and pretty much stunted it. So one of the hybridizers was over at the other hybridizer's house, just talking, developing stuff. And he looked at it and he said, what is that on your tree? He said, oh, that's blue cadet, but I think it's gotten messed up with the tree. And it was a big patch. I mean, it's a big, huge patch. And he says, I think it's transformed. And he said, well, we should test it. So they took some out, tested it for stability and, and all that stuff. And once they realized they had something, it became one of the fastest growing demand for hostas ever. I mean, it's several reasons. One, it's really hard to kill. Two is they work great in planters and edgers. People now on put their plants on the patios, or along the rock gardens and things like that. And it's unique because you can say blue mouse ears, and everybody that has seen it knows exactly what it's going to look like. That's what it looks like, blue mouse ears. This one here was kind of a so-so. It was supposed to be golden. The mouse ears have not done well with that phase, because you start with this and then you start getting variations. Can I get a white edge? Can I get a white center? Can I get a yellow contrast? Can I make the leaf ruffled? Can I make it more flat? Can I make, they're trying everything. The other thing they haven't been able to do is introduce red to them, and we'll talk about the red. So this guy was supposed to be chartreuse, and I just call it green mouse ear. It's only got a couple left. A little bit smaller than this one, but it's more yellow. It's a lighter color. It hasn't sold well in the marketplace because it doesn't really add much over the blue mouse ear. But this one is called Mouse on the Moon. This is ruffled, white edged, compact, same kind of flower, but it came through 3 other mice before I got to this. This mama was actually all white. It's called the solar mouse, but it's not real viable because it doesn't flip the chlorophyll fast enough, so it burns out. So I said, but the hybridizers go, yeah, but it's got that trait, so can I do something with that trait that's on there? So it actually said, never mind all this, we're going to make a curly leaf. It doesn't look like a blue mouse ear. We're going to be compact and really cute and have a white edge, and very, very compact. And so it's a lot of, there's probably 20, 25 varieties, different mice out there, and they still keep coming out because people now are hooked on babies, the minis, so they can do that. So, and then you plant them in a planter like this just turned out a convenient way to carry them. But that can make a nice showing, and it won't have to be thinned out to probably 3 or 4 years. But now you got yourself a miniature hosta bed in a very compact scenario. So it's fun. That's about a little over half of my sales are in minis, but they're hard to get. So I work really hard to get them. So, any questions? We're going to get into some of the disease while we talk about hosta virus X. The other one's nematodes. Nematodes are very natural in nature, and most of them are beneficial. But there's a group of them that are especially attracted to hostas and to daylilies. The same one, but you'll see them. And if you see a plant that's got brown stripes on it, it's got nematodes. And it'll survive it for a while, but eventually it'll just drain all the juice out of it, because what they do is go in there and just drain the life out of that segment, so the brown gets bigger and bigger and bigger. There is treatment for that now. It's actually an organic spray made of rosemary, 3 things. I'll try and remember. Cloves, I think, and something else anyway. So they found out it's so, No, not cinnamon. Not cinnamon. But what it does, you spray it,
it cuts off the oxygen to them. Doesn't hurt the plant, but it cuts off the oxygen to the nematode, so it kills it off. So it's a huge, huh?
It's in the leaf.
It's in the leaf. It'll get transferred. It transfers from leaf to leaf to leaf to leaf as they start getting crowded in there. So if you don't have them, you probably won't get them. But if you bring one in with them, they're all going to be sharing. So, but there is ways to treat that on it. Let's go to the animals, the ones everybody likes to talk about the most. Let's start small first. The voles. It's always one. Don't pass out on me now. They're very prolific. They can have 5 to 7 litters a year. So they just keep multiplying and multiplying and multiplying. Dig a hole, come in there and get the roots. And they're not partial to hostas. They'll take a lot of stuff down on there. And so to me, the most effective is the mousetrap. And what you do is you just get an old-fashioned mousetrap. They're cheap, 50 cents. Load it. I put peanut butter on it, and I put some black sunflower seeds. They really like the black sunflower. And just stick it in there where they're going to have to work to get it out of there. And of course, and then put it next to the hole. If you can find the vole hole, you just put it next to it. Put a pot over it. Otherwise, you're going to get a bird in there, or you're going to get your dog in there, and you're going to have a very unhappy dog. With that. But so you cover it up on that. And more times than not, you'll come back in a day or two and you'll have yourself a, former vole. So it's not too messy. It's not a chemical. A lot of the chemicals that will work for voles will also get transferred to other animals, not just the dogs and cats, but birds will pick it up, or whatever they transfer it. Next thing you know, you got this poison going through all the way through. So try to go natural as much as possible. The other thing to do is adopt a king snake. King snakes are great to have around. They love to eat voles and mice.
They don't have king snakes.
You'll have king snakes. What do they look like? Typically black. They're not. If it moves really fast, it's a black racer. But if it tends to get more fat than that. But they also is a black and white variety, which is a very beautiful snake. If you see it, they're very harmless. Oh, the voles look like little rats. Yeah, they're in the mouse family. Yeah.
Brown.
Yeah. And people get confused with moles and voles, and they will sometimes share a vole hole, but the moles don't eat the leaves, the roots. They're after grubs and stuff like that. And the mice, though, will share the tunnels with the voles. So when I was last year, I think it was last year before, I'm trying to remember anyway, in the space of 3 weeks, I got 17 voles, but 3 of them are mice. So, there's 17 total. So that's what surprised me. I said, what are the mice doing in here? And because you covered the hole up. Asking around, learning about it, the voles and moles, the voles and the mice share the tunnel. And so they come up and they're trying to find it, and so it solved 2 problems, but
Differentiate between mole hole and vole.
Mole holes tend to be bigger, and they tend to have a ridge, a hump over them. The voles just go straight down. You can't. All you see is a hole. The moles stay on top because that's where the grubs are. Huh?
When I would sleep, I'm sure it's a vole. It's usually right next to the plant.
Sure. And they can have in a space of 100 feet, 12 to 15 holes. Because they're kind of like rabbits. They always have a back trap door.
So you just put a track by every.
Just one, just start with one. It's a lot of work to do all those, but just start with one and just be patient for a couple of days and see if something hits. If it doesn't, then go to another one. But you'll be able to tell the more newer holes. And I go to those. The older ones, if they're tired of that hole, they'll just go away from it. Mothballs are very toxic, so that's one of the old ways of getting voles, but they're very toxic. And they get in the soil, they stay in the soil, and it's, it's someone to stay away from there. And you guys may have more insight on your side of that thing, but bulls are, especially in Charlotte,
That part of it is,
because they're so prolific.
moles are not. Moles, there'll be a couple.
Yeah.
And the only time, they're not very social little critters.
Yeah.
The only time they're social is during their mating season in late winter.
You can adopt an owl too. Owls like to get them too, because a lot of times they'll come out at night. So, that helps too.
The barn cat program. Very kind of, and he brings people's.
You might repeat that to the people.
What was that?
Cat from Union County adopts out barn cats.
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
And I tell you what, man, he's friendly, he brings people's
Oh.
all the time. I'm like, keep working, man. I'm happy.
And these, I'm assuming these have already been neutered.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, they neuter them, they tip the ear.
because they're as prolific as wolves are with making more
Yes.
cats, it's,
We have a couple horses and stuff, so, and ducks, and so I got him to keep the mice on my feet, but he does the holes for the.
yeah. So the best thing I can recommend for bulls, at this time is just the simplest one. Deer, well, let's talk rabbits. Rabbits are hit or miss. Rabbits typically don't eat a lot. They'll just chew the leaves and all that. Now, I got 4,000 hostas out there, so I have 2 rabbits that live there, and they don't bother me too bad. They don't mess up plants too much. I said, you can have 2 or 3, but not the rest of them. But they're doing well, on there, but they'll typically get the leaves and stay with just the leaf part of it, more than anything else. But they also, smells will keep them away. A dog will keep them away. Things like that. So I don't really have them as a bigger problem. Deer is the bigger problem. Because the deer, especially in Charlotte, because of the beltway that came in there, deers can't get out. They're trapped in there. So recommendations on deer is go to the 5 senses. What they see is what they're going to believe. All right, if they see you, they know they can outrun you, so they're not going to laugh. It's going to laugh and say, "I'm fine." If they see a fast dog, big dog, they'll keep moving. Coyotes keep them moving. If you have a coyote coming through there, they'll keep moving. Because coyotes really don't go after deer except babies or sick ones. So that's not really what they focus on. They like it easy. And they don't really, even though I've seen some packs, they typically tend to be loners, but they keep the deer moving because they know they can catch them and they know they're going to get in problems. So that's the sight. Then you go to smell, and you can use mill organite if you're familiar with mill organite. It's a organic fertilizer made in Milwaukee, which is where the name comes from. And it's human waste that's been sterilized, processed, and it's compost, basically. It's just, but it has that human smell to it. We really don't notice it too much, but they do. And so you just sprinkle around there, you fertilize your plant, and you got this barrier of smell that keeps them away. It'll keep the rabbits away too, but that's a good place to start because the plant's gonna benefit, and that's part of it. That's gonna be the smell part. The next part to go to is taste. And this is where the sprays kind of come in. Sprays are going to be the smell and the taste, or sometimes just the smell, or sometimes just the taste. But at any rate, they taste it and it's not to their liking. It's not what they like. And so they'll learn quickly on that part of it. So you've got that one on that. What's left in the senses here? Touch, well, touch. One thing I think is pretty clever is they've got sprinklers now that go on motion sensors. And so you put that out there and they come through there, that thing takes off, and scares them away there. So that's the touch part of it that comes from there. And that seems to have helped. The more you do, that are all simple, the more it will train them quickly. They'll learn very, very quickly. The deer in the headlights doesn't apply with food. But they will learn from that. Now, if you're spraying, there's 3 cycles on the spraying. There's spraying when they're having babies, going going through all that stuff. They're gonna be looking for a lot of food. June typically is baby month. You know, so they have the babies. Well, you train them in the spring and they all say, stay away from that. It's not good. But bring the baby in there and the baby says, oh, what's wrong with this? This is the good stuff. And so they'll all follow the baby and baby says, it's fine, didn't get sick. We'll eat that. All right. So you got to spray again because now you have a new added addition to the herd. The third time you do it is in late summer, early fall. Deer have a really neat trick to keep their DNA pool strong. They drop off 1 to 2, 3 members of the herd and add 2 or 3. So their gene pool, they bring in new blood, right? And so their gene pool stays strong. They're not breeding on the same, you know, it's not a bunch of cousins all together. So it works out, but that's the third cycle now. It's a third taste coming in there. So that's when you got to hit it on that part of it. So, and then change them up. They're, you know, they all work differently. I can't recommend one over another. Just people tell me some just work absolutely 100%. And I say for now, but you probably have to change it because somebody's gonna come along and figure out that you're tricking me. You know, so go to another one, you know, on it, just rotate them around. They'll go from there. The last one is physically blocking them, either a tall fence. That's just a lot of work, but butterfly netting, there's other names for it, but that's, I've always called it that. It's real thin, looks like a fish net. You can't see it 8 feet away. Typically black. You'll see the landscape. A lot of landscaping guys are doing it now because they'll make a bed for a neighborhood or something like that, and then they'll put this over the top of it because last thing it wants is a deer to come in there and clear it all out. So they'll put it over that, and that creates a physical barrier on them so they can't get to it. So that's the deer problem.
With that, that netting, it will capture snakes. And they get in and they can't get out. I've extracted several.
Okay, that's a good tip. Yeah, that's a good trick to know. I mean, yeah, there's not. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, there's no simple answer to it because my rule with deer is this: when it comes to anything to eat, and hostas get picked on all the time, but it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. I've seen them take roses down. I've seen them take azaleas down. You know, they'll just, whatever they get in the mood for, they'll go for. You know, so it's a matter of when. So, you know, if you get them away from your hostas, they'll fix something else to go eat. So you may want to spray more than stuff than not. Couple things. I know we're getting near the end of time here. Division. These start getting stiff, so if they see me stumbling around, it'll loosen them up. So this is lemon lime. Small one that's been around a long, long time. It's called, anybody know why they're called lemon lime? It goes through a phase of green lime and to yellow lemon. So it's a very fast grower. So this came out of this one pot. And if you take them and wash them, the roots, you can pretty much see where you divide them. I'll bring this because it's easier than a big plant and trying to, you know, show you all. And these will just simply come apart. Okay, so it's a little tangly, but it's okay. That's got plenty of roots on there. I still got a nice sized little hosta. This will double next year. So, you know, you can do that, but that's what you want to do. You want to see a good root substance. This is 2 of them, but it's got enough. And I could go to each one and it'd probably be, most of them would do okay. So, but that's my recommendation. If you got a big clump and you want to cut it up, you're just going to have to go in with a shovel, just cut straight down. The other thing I'd recommend is if you're dividing is to dip your knife or whatever tool you're using in a 10% bleach solution, because then you know you're not going to transfer any disease or virus or anything to another one. It's okay in the same plant, but if you're doing several hostas, different ones, you want to just dip your knife in there and just kill it off on it. You get a fungus looking or something looks like it's getting something funky going with a fungus, just give this a good bath of 10% bleach. It can take bleach, it doesn't bother it, but it'll kill it. Yeah, just put a gallon on there or even a quart. It'd be funny, it'll kill off anything. If you look it up and you see your roots are kind of getting brown and getting some kind of root fungus in there, when you spray that, when you pour it on there, He'll take care of that for you. Yeah. Huh? I want to plant. And these guys are hard to kill. Yeah, in 1 part bleach to 10 parts water or 9 parts water. Yeah, yeah. So you go from there. So the other reason they grow well here is that the soil pH in the Piedmont area is equal to what Hosta is like. So you don't have to do any tweaking with pH and lime or trying to get it to where it's happy. It's already there. Clay can be a best friend with hostas if you leave some of the clay in with your mixture, because it holds water, and so it works real well. What we have to watch out for here, though, is that we have layers and sheets of clay underneath there. If you ever dug into it, you'll find this whole clay pocket in there. And if you don't make sure the water will drain through there, then you're going to have a soup bowl. You're going to plant your plant in a soup bowl. It's going to sit there. So you want to make sure that you can get through that. If it's too thick, it's a true story here, but the one guy took some PVC pipe on there and he just plugged 3 holes. It basically made his home pot. But he made the holes deep enough, pulled them out, and then poured water in it, and the water drained down into it. So he made a pot, and then he planted on top of that. So you don't have to dig the whole thing out, but the clay will hold water, and so it's beneficial to that part of it. What's coming new on this flowering part of it? This guy here is one called Riptide. It's been around. Hybridizers like it for a lot of different reasons. If I go through the features on here, we've got ruffled edges, which, they want to do it, they need to show up, Just think if I was giving out free samples, and then what I do. So the edges are ruffled, and wavy on there. The neat little feature of that is that if in the slightest breeze at all, it'll move. So it'll pick that up because of the ruffle effect. And so you can get movement in your garden just by getting that type of leaf. Because all it takes is just a little bit of wind and you'll just see them, shimmering. This has got red on the bottom and it's not the stems, it's the come back to me, garden person. Huh? Yeah. Petiole down here, yeah. This one's mostly red, some speckling on it. And then your flower comes out with a very nice purple stalk and a nice rich purple on them. But in doing all this, I've seen this go all the way to black, which is really interesting. And I've seen this go to a really rich purple. The other thing that's neat on this one is underneath it. See the wax? So when you look at this away from that, I'm sorry, I don't understand it, blocking your picture. Keep forgetting you're there, you never speak up. The white is underneath there, so when it's sitting in an upright position, you get that green-white contrast that adds another characteristic to it. So this is some of the hints of what hybridizers look for in doing that. And then this one's actually the first patented red one. Called First Blush. Very red. The red goes all the way around the leaf. I'm going to got you guys again. All the way around, a real thin line on it, the red. And then when it first comes up in the first couple of weeks, this whole center right here will blush red. And then which is where First Blush came from. So, and they're doing more and more. You'll see this red coming into it. So it's a whole new layer of character in hostas. And so you can see what's coming next, right? They're going to want to get the red, and then can I get a white center? Can I get a white edge? Can I make it do this and do that? So it's kind of the fun of it. One of the other ones, this one here, you're not going to find very often. It's one been around a long time. But I've been here about 4 days ago. You've seen all the top flushed out flowers. This is called a ladier. It's one of those ones we call just another green hosta. They use this a lot for hybridizing. If any of you have or heard of Empress Wu, which has been advertised as like this big monster one, it won't get as big as they advertise it because of that 90 degrees. But this is one of the ones used to develop that because it's big, it grows big, and has those characteristics on it.
What's the name of that again?
Eladier, E-L-A-T-I-E-R. IOR. You probably won't find it. A lot of these have more success as hybridizing tools. Like Riptide I love, but you can't hardly get it because they'll use it for hybridizing because they can get the red out of it, but it's not, you can't, and the wax underneath there. So you don't have. The last thing we're going to talk about is misfits. Strip tees, if you're familiar with strip tees, the roots, always some people say your roots are growing out of there. When you're fertilizing, try some manganese in it. It loves manganese, so take some Epsom salts, a tablespoon of Epsom salts in a gallon of water, pour it in there, and the roots will do this. They'll just grow and be happy. If you have tomatoes and you use Miracle-Gro for tomatoes, just put that on there too, because that's manganese also. So, but that's how you get the strong, healthy roots and growing like that. This is strip tea. Strip teas came from a plant called Gold Standard. Okay, Gold Standard is, you can't find those anymore because they got hit with the virus and everybody just backed away from them because it got everywhere. And everybody was afraid to get them in there because they were so popular. But, it's the early phases of how do we deal with this? So this one got a big gold center on this Gold Standard. Strip teas, though, goes to dark green, a white edge on the inside here, and you can come and see it after. And this will go from a yellow to a green phase. And strip teas actually goes from a yellow to a green, and that's the strip part of it. But it's the last couple of batches that come out there have not been real stable, which is what we have here. This is one plant. You see what's left of strip teas, and now I got a brand new hosta, which is what? Another green hosta. So, should I register it? No, because it's not going to do anything. It's just but it tells me that this plant's not real stable. So it kind of went through that cycle. And it's a strange thing to happen. I have a friend of mine that had a big, huge hosta Gold Standard, and he actually had this, it actually started mutating to this from that plant all its own. So it sported it. And if you see the two plants, they don't even look related. It almost is like the mouse. They just, at some point in time, they don't look the same.
How do you improve the stability?
You can't. You can do on this one is you can cut out everything that's not the plant, because this is only one plant. All the rest of these are offshoots. So you can cut this one out, isolate it from these, put it in a pot, about a quart pot, or not too much longer. Let it get healthy. And if you're dividing and doing a lot of stuff, I always try to go to multiple small containers and let the roots get established and then get comfortable and healthy, and then plant them. Unless you've got big clumps, it's going to be the best return on your, on your investment, your time. But I bring this one because this happens. It happens. Even ones that's been around. Now, if they all go to this, there is variations come out of this thing that may turn into the next great big hospital. So know that. But a lot of them, well, not most of them, but it's kind of funny how some of the really important ones become out of accidents. Patriot and Minuteman came out of Francie. If you know Francie's a beautiful hosta. It's one of the ones I grow because all those three come up early. They're late risers. I'm sorry, they're late risers. So when the market starts hitting, they're just thinking about getting up. So by the time I got a good plant, good enough to sell, most of my business has already moved away. We're getting into that. So Francie, though, fights against that. It gets up there and grows pretty well. It makes a great edger, and you've seen around just a real thin one. The small ones is Francie. If you see big ones with a white edge, it's usually just a Fortunii, which has been around a long, long time. It's not even have a name on it. It's just on that. They're great plants. But the Patriot and Minuteman look very similar. One's got a wider margin, darker green in the middle. The other one's got a thinner white margin, but not a pencil one like Francie, and a little bit lighter green. Well, they were mutations off of being treated with an herbicide. They had sprayed them by mistake in a nursery up in New York with herbicide, and they transformed and mutated. So it was a pure accident that it happened on. So I think we've covered everything. Now questions. I think we've got questions. You already had your quote, I think.
Grow all my houses in pots.
Okay,
Is there a rule of thumb as to
when to trim them up a little bit?
their large?
Can you repeat your question?
Yeah, the question is, she grows most of her hostas in containers. So how do you know when it's the appropriate time to freshen them up? You can freshen them every year, just pull them out, take about a quarter or half the dirt off the bottom, put fresh dirt on it and keep it on there until they get to the point where they're crowding the pot. Okay, so that's when be a good time to thin it from there, you know. And he'll typically, in a pot, will go 3 to 7 years before you have to do something with it. But your first sign will be either the pot's getting ready to explode or your leaves have started to shrink
But they have.
because there's so much in there, it can't get enough nutrients to do that. The same thing happens if you plant it too close to a tree. So if you're planting it too close to a tree, let's pretend this thing up here is our tree trunk. Okay, and then this is our drip line here, which is the umbrella where the water's gonna come down. You wanna be at least halfway from that tree trunk out here, okay? And over time, like the blue mouse ears, the tree grew to the mouse ears, to the blue cadet, and transformed it, so it was able to keep its water. But pin oak and willow oaks, they'll take every bit of water you got. So you want to be out at least halfway from there, and then just be prepared to plant them. If you want to keep them that distance, and you may have to burn them up some on it, but it's going to depend on what tree you've got underneath there. My recommendation on container growing is to put a flat rock paver underneath your pot. Because if you don't, you'll know when you get ready to pick that pot up, doesn't want to move. Because what's happened is your tree roots are growing up in there, sucking all the water out of there, and they're now holding your pot down and it won't move. So you got to create a barrier out there to keep them doing that. Okay. And containers are great. I mean, there's some great gardens I've seen where they're growing in containers because you can move them around. You know, and if you're not sure where you're going to put them, if you're going to do a whole hosta bed, leave them in the containers and spread them out and see what your eye looks at. Because when you go out on your back deck or go outside with a cup of coffee and look in the morning, if you got a chartreuse one, your eye's going to go right there. It's going to go the most dramatic one out there and then move from there. So you want to say, okay, do I want them to see this first or do I want to see something else first? So you kind of work from there. Any other questions? You have a question?
The miniature ones?
Is it possible to grow inside? I mean, right, grow
Go inside?
Bigger ones?
Growing a hosta inside is, you can do it for a summer. The thing that the hosta needs to have is dormancy. It's got a dormancy. It's got to rest. And so in the fall, they'll die back and you can clean it up or you can, leave it. It depends what you want, how much work you want to do. Because like daylilies, they'll just die back and they'll just come back up again. What you want to do is they need at least 400 hours below 40 degrees. And this is a study that Tony Avan up in Gardens of Lights and outside Raleigh did. Because he's a pretty good hybridizer too. He's got some great ones. So they know they need 400 hours below 40 degrees. That's not, in a row, but if you just start counting your days out, you'll see that we hit that number pretty easily. You don't have to be freezing, but it does get that cold. The watch for, because we get a heaving. If you're familiar with heaving, the ground freezes and it's either going to shrink your plant down, pull it down when it thaws, or it's going to push it up. Pushing it up is not quite a big a problem with the hosta, but pulling it down is. Because what you're going to have, your crown goes below the root, the surface, and you got a good chance of getting crown rot. Same thing with azaleas. Azaleas, you want them planted up there so they keep that crown dry. So just think of your hosta, the same type of thing, mound it up. And if it's getting flat, just dig it up a little bit, put a little manure or compost underneath it, and stick it back down. It won't hurt. It's going to fertilize it, and you're going to keep it up. Little garden work. Anything else? Depends on what you're fertilizing with. They don't require a lot of fertilizer. If you're using Miracle Grow, probably once a month's plenty. If you're using something like time release like Osmocote only works on heat. So it doesn't work 12 months of the year. So it'll have no value until those eyes come up. When the eyes come up, then you know it's warm enough, the soil temperature is getting warm enough for the plant to grow. So that's when you can put your osmocote out there and it'll start working. Otherwise, it won't work. It's heat activated. There is time release ones. There's one I think is pretty good called Dynamite. They have a lot of different specialty ones, but there's a time relief that's about 10, 10, 10 or 8, 8, 8. I don't remember. There's a good balanced one on there. If you have one that has flowers that you really like, you might want to kick that, phosphate up a little bit. If you got rich colors and all that, you may want to kick the nitrogen up a little bit. But, they don't require a lot of fertilizer. The rule I tell people that never grown hostas before, my rules are real simple. If it's wet, let it dry out. If it's dry, water it. And always plant it green side up. And if you get that down, 9% of your hostas will grow just fine. So this is for novices. If you've never done a plant, you got to kind of go back to basics, right?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I have 2 giant willow oaks.
Okay.
Basically cover my whole backyard shade, which is why I came here to learn about this.
Containers.
What was that?
Containers.
So, and I'm originally from Wisconsin, if you can't hear it. Can we keep them in containers and year round?
Yes. Yes.
Can you repeat that, please?
Yeah, she has willow oaks and there are a lot in her yard, a lot of shade. And the question is, my recommendation is go to containers because that is a very top fibrous root mass on those pin oaks too. But that stays on top. They don't go deep. They have deep roots, but they just have surface feeders like crazy. And you can tell if you just look at the tree and there's no grass around it, it's not going to be grass around it because that tree's sucking up all the water. So you go to a container, put a rock underneath it. Because it'll grow up into it, trust me, I know. and you grow it in there, but then you can get height on it. You can get different heights, you can get different, a whole different way of looking at it for landscaping, Otherwise, just move away from those willow oaks because they really suck up the water. Yeah. Okay.
I'm getting in trouble because
I'm hustling. So
I'll tell stories all night long. So she's telling me that,
Did you bring your bowl license?
Oh, did. That's why I keep around. Because I have more stuff to talk about than we have time.
Thank you for pointing out when you say you want to be. You guys selling them so large and you do not.
These come in 1 gallon up to 15 gallons. And they're about $4 each. You see, you can't see it. I know it. Just trust me, you can't see it. Amazon or Walmart. You can get it online. Walmart doesn't have them in the stores, but they'll ship it to you. It's just called a bowl guard. Yeah, a bowl basket, different names. You just pull up bowl, guard and you'll see it. They're come flat. It's stainless steel. So it's not going to rust. It's going to frustrate the bowls and they're going to, bounce away from it. A 5 gallon one, I'd say was plenty, unless you're growing minis, but the minis is a whole different challenge unless you plant inside the circle. But dig your hole. I take some bamboo stakes and stick them up to hold this up, mainly because they're easier to pull out when you and then put your plant in the dirt in there and just leave it. It's not going on there, but it will stop the bulls. So
And out above the ground, I take it.
it's in the ground.
You
We
leave,
can leave a little lip, just a little lip, but not much. Just
go over it.
no, because they dig underground. So yeah, they could, but they don't. They're too lazy. They're not going to do that. I mean, otherwise, they'll be going in your planters and they'll be going into everything.
Use the big, I'm not catching this, the big basket you put underneath.
Think of it as a liner. You're going to line your hole with this. And the more expensive way, but it works too well, is to line it with rocks. You need a really scratchy, itchy rock. Permatil. Permatil helps a lot, you know, but it needs more rocks. That's the problem with permatil. Yeah, yeah. 5 gallon is plenty. 1 gallon can be enough, but you know, 5 gallon or 3 gallon is plenty for a hosta. Because even if the roots grow out of the thing, the hosta's gonna be fine. It's just gonna stay inside. This is, yeah, there's smaller ones, but I'm not gonna open it up. It's just smaller. Okay.
You actually put that in the ground.
It's a liner, yeah. Dig your hole, set it in there. I use bamboo sticks, but anything to hold it up.
Yeah.
Okay, and then you put some dirt in it and just build it up from there. This is a liner. Stainless steel mesh, it's not gonna go through it, not gonna rust away. And they're gonna be frustrated and go to something else. You know, your neighbor's yard, probably. And I recommend, there's several good books on hostas. The problem, as I told you earlier, there's too many varieties, so every time they publish one, it's out of date, in terms of what's available. This one is out of print, but you can find it on the internet. It's the Hosta Handbook. Mark Zills is a major hybridizer. He's got an encyclopedia one that is really loaded with information. I use this one a lot because most of the hostas people are aware of are still around and here. But it's also got some great references on the back of what a disease looks like, what a cutworm damage looks like versus a slug versus a virus. You know, so you get a quick reference as to what is that. The other thing it'll tell you on a good hosta book is what they come from, because knowing the parent is a big beneficial. You know, I mean, about 3 years ago, Harris Teeter drove me crazy. They brought in a whole bunch of hostas for sale, and it was a green one, a blue one, there was a white-edged one, and a white-centered one. And that was all the description you got. You had no idea where they were. You don't know when they're going to, flower or how big they're going to get, anything, and then that's okay if you're playing around. But, if you're a serious hosta grower, you want to know what the flower is going to look like, when it's going to do that. You want to know the contrast and everything else. The other one I'll tell you is a website called hostalibrary.org, I think. The Hosta Library, you pull it up, and there's listings of, they have hosta raffles, they have auctions, they have history. There's a lot of topics in there. You can get more stuff on deer and bulls and all that stuff more in depth. I just try to give you the basics here, like green side up. But they're all the letters are up there. So you say, okay, I know the name of the hosta, click that letter, it'll open that category up. And then if it's one like blue, it'll be a whole bunch of them, because there's, because so many of them in that category. So you're just trying to figure out where your letters are. Click on that. It will show you a bunch of pictures on it. So you'll know what it's looked like, a mature plant. The top picture in the left corner right there, you'll see a little database thing on it. You click on that and it tells you who made it, who developed it, or how they found it, if you even know what the background is, what the cross is, the mama and papa, if they know that, or at least half of them, when the flowers are going to bloom, what color they are. You've got all that stuff on there. And then also on the bottom of it, you're going to get sports. So like Halcyon is a great blue. It's a medium blue. It's from a group called Tardiana that this guy in England just locked himself up for about 6 months and developed 14 different blues of all different shapes and sizes. So they're all called Tardianas. But the Halcyon's one of them. Mama's pretty good. I like Halcyon a lot, and I grow it. But Mama had 2 babies that got Hosta of the year. One was June, and one was First Frost. So it's a good plant. So if you're planting of those 3, the gold centered, the white edged, and the Halcyon, right there, they're all going to flower at the same time. They're going to grow all be about the same time, and the same size, and you're going to get a really nice show in a short period of time. So, okay. I got more stories, but it's just more for fun.
You mentioned earlier that most hostas like shade.
Yes, they are shade lovers. America's #1 shade plant.
However, I have 2 that are flourishing in full sun. And it makes me wonder, maybe they're not.
Wait till June, July. Wait till July.
They did last year.
Did they start turning brown? Okay.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Are they chartreuse colored? Okay.
Others can't.
So she's got a picture on her phone. It's a white edge one. It looks like a Fortunii probably, which is a very fast growing one. So, you know, some of them will tolerate it, you know, but in Florida, yeah, that's a chartreuse one. And that one looks like,
It's sun, and you know when it's.
Yeah.
So. But
that one almost looks like gold standard, which is really hard, but it's an old one. I mean, if you've had it along like 25 years.
oh no.
Okay.
We've been in South
Bought it at
Carolina.
Harris Teeter didn't have one that good. She didn't have one that good. How big is the leaf?
Say 6 inches, maybe.
That's about a medium-sized one. That could be June. June can take some more sun. You know, some of them are, the plant Genea ones can take more sun. In Florida now, they keep trying to sell them as sun hostas. You know, they say they tolerate them, but, you know, I'm not picking on the Yankees here, but I can always tell when somebody's moving north because they grow them in full sun. Because it's just a different season and the hot sun's not as hot till later, you know, and so it's different. But as soon as you see a full sun driveway lined with hostas, you know, they moved from the north. Because they moved to what they were used to, which makes sense, but the habitat's different. But you know, and so I tell people they can take sun, but stay out of 2 to 4 in the afternoon, or 1 to 5, even better. But stay out of that afternoon sun, you'll be fine. You know.
And my other question has to do with slugs. I think I.
Slugs. That's slug damage.
And.
Yeah.
Let's see your son.
That's slug damage. Yeah. Slugs need to be irritated. To change their mind. The old school one was put a pan of beer out on that. Okay. Biggest mistake people make on that pan of beer is guess what? Yeah. They put it right. They put it where the plant is. They put it where the plant is. And so what happens is you just bring in more slugs. You know, what you want to do is like a Japanese beetle trap, right? You want your neighbors to have all those traps. So all those Japanese beetles will go over there to the traps, right? So you want your beer pan away from the hosta, so you'll pull all the slugs away from that. It's very effective. It's a get cheap beer, you know, because they don't care. You know, and then you don't cry too bad if you're wasting good beer. And you'll see them, they'll just fill the pan out on that, but that works very well. Diatomaceous earth, which is a fancy name for ground up seashells, works. Sprinkle it around it and it'll last for a period of time. You'll see, if as it rains, it'll slowly sink down. But that's a very rough surface. It cuts right through the slugs and it just, you know, takes them out. Yeah. The other thing you can do, permatil is a name for, Daddy Pete's has for a slate that's blown up. It's slate, but they superheat it with heat. And it just expands the thing until they blow up. And if they get to a certain degree, then they'll either grind it or whatever. But they originally took slate and they're using it to pave roads because it makes it as strong, if not stronger than slate, but it's 20 to 25% less weight. So trucks can load up more of that and bring it and pave the road with a lot less weight and a lot more efficiently. Nations Bank, or I can still call it Nations Bank, it's Bank of America now. That's built with that those panels are all that plate because they're able to do it because it's so much lighter. But you get those, you get just the plate. I'm trying to think of the name for it. Stay-lite, I think it's Stay-lite. It's actually mined just down the road here towards Albemarle. It's one of the largest slate places in the country, and they process it there, and it's an amazing process. What they do on it, but they superheat it, but it makes it very rough, very light, and you just get that and sprinkle it around it, and that'll hold up a lot longer on it. It'll frost.
Regarding the HVAC fires,
The what?
Hosta virus X, yeah.
Um, like if you saw some at a box store, say, would they say if they've been screened or not?
No,
Okay.
they wouldn't know. Big boxes don't have no idea. You ask them that and they look at you like the deer in the headlights. What? You know,
And then if you ended up with one that had it, is it?
dig it up, throw it out.
Yeah, you dig it up, get rid of it. Is it just contained in that area or?
Yeah, yeah.
Through.
No, it'll stay in that area. It resides in the plant, but you have some in the soil. And that's why they say, just like some things with roses, you don't plant a rose in a diseased hole. And the hostas don't plant another hosta in there, because you're just gonna end up with a new problem. But yeah, you'll know it. And if you come up and see my book, you'll see I got pictures of it, but just think of it looking like it's pimply, spotted, texture. It's just totally, like as somebody poured acid over it. It's just a reaction of it.
So you don't plan on it there forever? You know, this disease,
There's no cure for it.
so 5 years later, you get maybe plants there again.
That's when it'll show up, 5 to 7 years after you get it. So know your plant, know your grower, know where it's coming from. If they don't know about Hosta virus X, then you gotta say, well, where do you get them from? Who gets them? You can drop me a note and I can give you some guidance, because I have an idea where most of them get their plants from. I stay under the radar because I get mine from a lot of growers. I'm in the American Hosta Growers Society. So I've got a lot of connections in there. It's not a big society, but there's a lot of hybridizers in there. So they come up with something and I'll say, I'll take them. I'll take 96 of them or whatever, and so that's why with mine, you'll see a lot of different, you're not going to find in the regular store on it, but it's gotten better. I mean, it really has, because there's been a lot of pressure on it and say, we're not going to buy your hostas if you don't screen for virus X. But then it comes down to trust. Did they really screen it for it or not? But if they can answer that question, they probably did. That helps. I hope you heard the question. I don't know.
No questions online, Christina? Yeah. Any other questions?
I'll wore them out. All right.
Thank you, Neil.
Oh, I put them to sleep then. Thank you. You guys have been great. You've been great.
Welcome to come here and look at the hospital. Got up here and answer more questions.
Typically, I'd bring a lot of hospitals here for sale when I do these talks and stuff, but this is an off year, but that's a story in itself. But